Imagine a world teetering on the edge of eternal darkness, where the legendary Sun Wukong must rise from centuries of imprisonment to face an ancient evil. In this epic tale of light versus shadow, the Monkey King battles overwhelming odds to save a world on the brink of destruction. If you're ready for a story filled with breathtaking battles and unforgettable twists, hit that subscribe button and join us on this incredible journey. Part 1. The Reckoning of the Monkey King. The ancient mountains of Huaguo stood tall, their peaks shrouded in mist that twisted like the breath of 1,000 spirits. Deep within this realm of shadows and echoes, the formidable Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, lay imprisoned. Thousands of years had passed since he last saw the light of day, bound by the unyielding chains of the gods, buried beneath the weight of his own hubris. Long ago, Sun Wukong had been the greatest of all warriors, a being of unparalleled strength and cunning. His feats were legendary, his name whispered with reverence and fear. But it was not enough for him. The Monkey King, driven by an insatiable thirst for power and recognition, dared to challenge the heavens themselves. He sought to overthrow the gods, to claim a throne among them. The gods, threatened by his audacity and relentless power, united against him. They were many, and he was one. Though he fought valiantly, the battle was doomed from the start. The heavens rained fire and lightning upon him, and the earth trembled under the weight of their conflict. In the end, it was the combined might of the gods that subdued him, chaining him within a mountain of stone, sealed by powerful enchantments designed to suppress his immense strength. For centuries, Sun Wukong had remained there, his fiery spirit dampened but never extinguished. He could feel the weight of time pressing down on him, each moment a reminder of his failure, of the might that had been stolen from him. Yet, deep within, the flame of rebellion still burned. He would not be broken. He would never submit to the will of the gods. But the world outside had changed. The lands had grown darker, shadows spreading like a plague across the kingdoms of men and beasts alike. Unbeknownst to Sun Wukong, a great evil had risen during his imprisonment, a force so ancient and malevolent that even the gods trembled at its return. This was Xiang Yao, the King of Shadows, an exiled deity who had once been a god of balance, now twisted into a harbinger of chaos and destruction. As the darkness spread, devouring the light, the gods found themselves powerless to stop it. Their strength had waned over the millennia, and the balance they had maintained for so long was slipping through their fingers. In their desperation, they turned to the one being they had once feared above all others, the very entity they had cast down and imprisoned. It was in the stillness of the mountain, where only the echoes of his past raged within him, that Sun Wukong felt the first stirrings of change. The air grew thick with the scent of ancient magics, and the earth trembled as the seals that bound him began to weaken. The gods, in their infinite wisdom or folly, had chosen to release him. A blinding light pierced the darkness of his prison, and the chains that had held him for so long crumbled to dust. Sun Wukong's eyes snapped open, glowing with a fierce golden light. His muscles, once rigid from years of confinement, surged with newfound power. The enchantments that had suppressed his abilities dissolved, and with a single flex of his mighty arms, he shattered the remnants of his stone tomb. He stood tall, his fur bristling as he took his first breath of freedom in millennia. The air outside was heavy with the stench of decay, the sky darkened by the looming threat of Xiang Yao. But the Monkey King was not the same as before. He had been humbled, but not broken. He had been caged, but not tamed. Emerging from the mountain, Sun Wukong surveyed the world around him. The once vibrant forests of Huaguo were now withered and gray, the rivers tainted with a darkness that seemed to leach life from the very earth. This was no longer the world he knew, but it was a world that needed him. As he stood at the mountain's edge, his gaze turned upward toward the heavens that had betrayed him, a voice echoed in his mind, a voice as old as time itself, the voice of the gods. They spoke of a mission, of a chance for redemption. They needed him to fight, not for his own glory, but for the survival of all creation. But Sun Wukong was not a pawn to be played by the gods. His loyalty was not easily won, and his thirst for vengeance had not been quenched. Yet, the threat of Xiang Yao was real, and it was one he could not ignore. He would embark on this journey, not for the gods, but for the world that had once been his home. With a grim determination, Sun Wukong set forth from the mountain, his legendary staff, the Ruyi Jingu Bang, appearing in his hand as if summoned by his very will. The journey ahead would be fraught with peril, with enemies both old and new. But the Monkey King was ready. He had been reborn from the ashes of his defeat, and this time he would not be stopped. The gods had unleashed their greatest weapon, but whether they could control it remained to be seen. As Sun Wukong ventured into the world once more, a storm brewed on the horizon, one that would shake the heavens and the earth to their very cores. Part 2. The Path of Shadows. Sun Wukong moved through the world like a phantom, his presence both feared and revered by those who still remembered his name. The once lush lands of Huaguo were now twisted and corrupted, the forests reduced to gnarled, lifeless husks, and the rivers choked with blackened, stagnant water. The sky above was a canvas of perpetual twilight, a dull gray that never yielded to dawn or dusk. This was the mark of Xiang Yao's influence, a creeping darkness that sought to consume all in its path. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Wukong knew one thing for certain. To defeat Xiang Yao, he would need to reclaim the strength and power he had once wielded. The gods had weakened him during his imprisonment, stripping away not only his physical might, but also his connection to the ancient magics that had once coursed through him. To face the King of Shadows, he would need to regain what was lost, and perhaps even more. His first destination was the Temple of the Eternal Flame, a place of legend where it was said the gods had hidden one of the most powerful artifacts in existence, an artifact that could restore Wukong's abilities and grant him the strength needed to challenge Xiang Yao. The temple lay deep within the heart of the Shadowlands, a region that had fallen completely under the control of the darkness. As Wukong journeyed towards the temple, he encountered the first of many obstacles, the remnants of an ancient army, now twisted and corrupted by Xiang Yao's influence. These were the Shades, warriors who had once fought for honor and glory, now reduced to hollow shells, their souls consumed by darkness. Their armor was blackened and rusted, their weapons crude and jagged, but they fought with a ferocity that belied their decayed forms. Wukong's staff, the Ruyi Jingubang, cut through them like a blade through mist. But for every shade he felled, two more seemed to rise in its place. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. But Wukong pressed on, his resolve unshakable. He had faced armies before, and he would not be deterred by the undead remnants of one. The battle raged on, and for a moment it seemed as though the shades might overwhelm him. But Wukong had not survived millennia of imprisonment to be defeated so easily. With a roar that shook the very earth, he unleashed a burst of raw energy, scattering the shades in all directions. The ground trembled as if in fear of his power, and the shadows themselves seemed to recoil from his might. Yet even as he stood victorious, Wukong knew that this was only the beginning. The shades were but the first of many challenges that Xiang Yao would throw in his path. The true test lay ahead, within the temple itself. The temple of the eternal flame was a sight to behold, even in its corrupted state. Once a beacon of light and hope, its walls were now cracked and blackened, the flames that had once burned bright reduced to mere embers. The entrance was guarded by statues of forgotten gods, their faces twisted in expressions of anguish and despair. The air was thick with the weight of ancient magics, a reminder of the power that still lingered within. As Wukong stepped into the temple, he could feel the presence of something old and powerful, something that had been waiting for him. The walls seemed to close in around him, the shadows pressing in from all sides. But Wukong was not afraid. He had faced the wrath of the heavens and survived. There was nothing in this temple that could break him. The inner sanctum of the temple was a place of darkness, the only light coming from a single, flickering flame at its center. This was the eternal flame, a relic of the gods themselves, said to contain the power of creation and destruction. It was this flame that Wukong sought, for within it lay the key to his rebirth. But as he approached the flame, a voice echoed through the chamber, a voice that sent a shiver down even Wukong's spine. It was the voice of Xiang Yao, dark and filled with malice. "You seek power, Monkey King, but what will you do with it? You were defeated once, and you will be defeated again. The darkness is inevitable." Wukong clenched his staff tightly, his eyes blazing with determination. "You may have corrupted this world, Xiang Yao, but you will not corrupt me. I will see you fall." Laughter echoed through the chamber, a cold and hollow sound. "We shall see, Sun Wukong. We shall see." With a deep breath, Wukong reached out towards the eternal flame. As his hand neared the flickering light, the shadows around him seemed to grow, as if trying to snuff out the flame entirely. But Wukong was undeterred. He plunged his hand into the flame, feeling its warmth spread through him, igniting a fire within that he had not felt in centuries. The shadows recoiled, and the flame flared bright, filling the chamber with a brilliant light. Wukong could feel the power returning to him, his strength growing with each passing moment. The chains that had bound his abilities for so long were shattered, and the connection to the ancient magics was restored. He was whole once more. As the light of the eternal flame washed over him, Wukong felt a sense of clarity, a focus that he had not known in ages. The path ahead was clear. He would not only defeat Xiang Yao, but he would reclaim his place as the greatest warrior the world had ever known. The gods had unleashed him upon the world, and now he would unleash his fury upon those who dared to threaten it. With a final glance at the flame, Wukong turned and strode out of the temple, his heart burning with purpose. The journey was far from over, but the first step had been taken. He was ready for whatever lay ahead, and Xiang Yao would soon learn that the Monkey King was not a force to be trifled with. The shadows would not claim him, nor would they claim the world. Soon Wukong was free, and his vengeance would be swift and terrible. Part 3. Allies in the Shadows. With the power of the eternal flame coursing through his veins, soon Wukong felt a resurgence of strength and confidence that had long been dormant. The flame had not only restored his abilities, but had also awakened a deeper understanding of the forces at play. The world was a fragile balance of light and darkness, and Xiang Yao sought to tip that balance into eternal night. Wukong was determined to prevent that, but he knew that even his power alone might not be enough. As he ventured further into the Shadowlands, the desolation around him deepened. The land was a twisted mirror of what it once was, a place where life had been choked out by the encroaching darkness. The sky remained an oppressive gray, casting everything in a perpetual twilight. Yet, there was something more, a faint pulse of life that Wukong could sense, hidden beneath the layers of shadow and despair. His journey led him to a forgotten village. Its buildings crumbled and overrun by the encroaching wilderness. The streets were empty, the silence oppressive, but Wukong's keen senses picked up on something. The faintest whisper of movement, a shadow slipping between the ruins. He followed it, his steps silent as he pursued whatever or whoever was watching him. The shadow led him to the heart of the village, where an ancient tree stood, its roots gnarled and twisted, but still clinging to life. Beneath its branches, a figure emerged from the shadows. A woman, her features sharp and her eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. She was cloaked in dark robes, blending seamlessly with the shadows around her. "I know who you are," the woman said, her voice carrying the weight of ages. "The Monkey King, the one who defied the heavens." Wukong studied her warily, his grip on his staff tightening. "And who are you, lurking in the shadows?" The woman smiled, a cold and enigmatic expression. "My name is Mei Ling, and like you, I have been wronged by the gods. They took everything from me, cast me into the darkness. But I learned to survive, to thrive in the shadows. And now, I seek to reclaim what was stolen from me." Wukong raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You speak of vengeance, but against whom? The gods or Xiang Yao?" "Both," Mei Ling replied, her voice firm. "Xiang Yao's darkness has consumed these lands, but it is the gods who allowed it to happen. They were too proud, too arrogant to see the danger until it was too late. Now they send you, their last hope, to clean up their mess." Wukong couldn't help but smirk. "You have a way with words, Mei Ling, but I am no one's pawn, not anymore. I fight for my own reasons." Mei Ling nodded, her gaze never leaving his. "As do I, but if we are to stop Xiang Yao, we cannot do it alone. The darkness he commands is unlike anything this world has ever seen. If you are to succeed, You will need allies, those who understand the shadows as well as the light. Wukong considered her words carefully. He had always been a lone warrior, relying on his own strength and cunning. But the truth was undeniable. Jiang Yao's power was vast, and Wukong could not defeat him through brute force alone. Allies could be the key to victory, especially those who had been touched by the darkness and survived. "What do you propose?" Wukong asked, his tone measured. Mei Ling stepped closer, her expression serious. "There are others like me, scattered across the Shadowlands. We were once guardians, protectors of the balance, but we were cast out when Jiang Yao's influence grew too strong. If we can unite, we can form a resistance, a force capable of challenging the darkness." Wukong nodded slowly. "Very well. Lead the way, and let us see if these guardians are worthy of joining the fight." Mei Ling's smile returned, this time with a hint of genuine warmth. "Follow me, Monkey King, and you shall see." Together, they left the village, venturing deeper into the Shadowlands. The journey was perilous, the land itself seeming to resist their passage. The shadows grew thicker, more oppressive, and Wukong could feel the malevolent presence of Xiang Yao, watching their every move. Their first destination was a hidden sanctuary, a place where the light still held sway, albeit barely. It was a temple carved into the side of a mountain, its entrance obscured by a waterfall of dark, viscous liquid that pulsed with an eerie light. Mei Ling led the way, her form merging with the shadows as she passed through the waterfall, with Wukong close behind. Inside, the temple was a stark contrast to the darkness outside. The walls were lined with glowing runes, and a soft golden light filled the chamber, emanating from a central altar. Around the altar stood several figures, each one cloaked in shadows, their faces hidden beneath hoods. "These are the remaining guardians," Mei Ling whispered to Wukong as they approached the group. "Once, they were the defenders of this land, but now they have been forced into hiding." The guardians turned as one, their eyes glowing faintly from beneath their hoods. One of them stepped forward, his voice deep and resonant. "Who dares to enter our sanctuary?" Mei Ling bowed her head slightly. "It is I, Mei Ling, and I have brought an ally, one who seeks to end the darkness that plagues our world." The guardian studied Wukong for a long moment before speaking. "We know of you, Sun Wukong. The stories of your deeds are legend. But why should we trust you? You were once an enemy of the gods, a being of chaos and destruction." Wukong met the guardian's gaze evenly. "I was many things in the past, but now I fight for something greater. I fight to stop Xiang Yao and to restore the balance that has been lost. If you wish to stay hidden in the shadows, then so be it. But if you truly care about this world, then join me, and together we will bring an end to this darkness." The guardians exchanged glances, their silent communication speaking volumes. Finally, the leader nodded. "We will join you, Sun Wukong. But know this, Xiang Yao is not an enemy to be underestimated. He has corrupted the very fabric of our reality. To face him is to face the end itself." Wukong grinned, his confidence undiminished. "I wouldn't have it any other way." With the guardians now allied to his cause, Wukong felt a renewed sense of purpose. These were not ordinary warriors. They were beings of immense power, each one a master of the shadows. Together, they formed a formidable force, one that Xiang Yao would not expect. As they left the sanctuary, Wukong could feel the weight of destiny pressing upon him. The final confrontation was drawing closer, and the stakes had never been higher. But with allies by his side, he knew that he stood a chance, no matter how slim, of emerging victorious. The journey was far from over, but the Monkey King was ready. The shadows would not claim him, nor would they claim his world. And as the darkness loomed ever closer, soon Wukong prepared himself for the battle that would decide the fate of all creation. Part 4. Gathering the Storm. Sun Wukong, Mei Ling, and the Guardians moved swiftly across the Shadowlands, their every step bringing them closer to the heart of darkness, where Xiang Yao's power was strongest. The land around them grew more twisted and malevolent with each passing day, the very air heavy with the stench of decay and the cries of lost souls. Yet, with each step, their resolve only hardened. The Guardians, once scattered and broken, were now united under Wukong's leadership. Each of them had been touched by the darkness in different ways, and each had their own reasons for joining the fight against Xiang Yao. Mei Ling, in particular, had become a trusted ally to Wukong, her knowledge of the Shadowlands proving invaluable as they navigated the treacherous terrain. As they traveled, they encountered other survivors, beings who had managed to resist Xiang Yao's influence and were willing to fight back. Among them were ancient warriors, mystical creatures, and even a few rebellious spirits who had escaped the grasp of the underworld. Wukong welcomed them all, knowing that every ally would be crucial in the battles to come. One of the most significant encounters occurred at the ruins of Xingyun, a once great city that had been consumed by the darkness long ago. Here, Wukong and his companions found a group of warriors who had managed to survive by forming an underground resistance. Their leader, a stern and battle-hardened man named General Jian, had once been a hero of the people before the shadows fell upon his city. General Jian was skeptical of Wukong at first, having heard tales of the Monkey King's past, defiance, and destruction. But after witnessing Wukong's strength and determination firsthand, he agreed to join the alliance. "If there is a chance to free my people from this curse, I will fight alongside you," Jian said, his voice filled with a deep, unwavering resolve. With General Jian and his warriors now part of their growing force, Wukong felt the tides beginning to turn. But he knew that the road ahead was still fraught with danger. Xiang Yao was no fool. He would be preparing his own defenses, and the final battle would not be won easily. As they moved deeper into the Shadowlands, Wukong began to sense the presence of something powerful and ancient, something that had been watching them from the moment they entered the darkened lands. It was as if the very essence of the shadows was alive, pulsing with a malevolent will of its own. This was no ordinary darkness. It was a manifestation of Xiang Yao's own corrupted soul. Their path eventually led them to the Black Abyss, a massive chasm that split the earth like a wound. The air around the abyss was thick with despair, and the ground trembled as if in pain. It was here that the final confrontation with Xiang Yao would take place, in the very heart of his domain. But before they could proceed, they needed to unlock the abyss gate, a barrier of pure darkness that blocked their path. Mei Ling explained that the gate could only be opened by the combined power of the Guardians, using an ancient ritual that would bind their energies together. The guardians took their places around the abyss gate, their forms glowing with a faint light, as they began to chant in unison. The air hummed with energy as the ritual began, the ground beneath them shifting as the gate slowly began to crack open. But as the ritual reached its peak, a powerful surge of dark energy erupted from the chasm, knocking several of the guardians off their feet. From the depths of the abyss emerged a creature of pure shadow, its form shifting and writhing as it took shape. This was one of Xiang You's most fearsome creations, a being forged from the very essence of the darkness that had consumed the world. Its eyes glowed with a fiery hatred, and its roar echoed across the land, shaking the very foundations of the earth. Wukong stepped forward, his staff at the ready, his heart burning with a fierce determination. "This is it," he said, his voice low and steady. "The final test before we face Xiang Yao himself." The battle that followed was nothing short of cataclysmic. The creature of shadow moved with a speed and ferocity that defied belief, its attacks relentless and devastating. But Wukong was no ordinary warrior. He was the Monkey King, a being of unmatched skill and power. With Mei Ling and the Guardians by his side, Wukong fought with every ounce of strength he possessed. The battle raged on for what felt like hours, the ground torn asunder by the sheer force of their blows. But in the end, it was Wukong who stood victorious, his staff piercing the heart of the shadow creature, its form dissolving into nothingness with a final, anguished cry. As the creature fell, the abyss gate finally shattered, revealing the path into the heart of Xiang Yao's domain. The way forward was clear, but the cost had been great. Several of the guardians had fallen during the battle, their forms fading into the shadows they had once sought to control. Wukong knelt beside the Phelan, his heart heavy with sorrow. These were beings who had given everything to protect the world, and their sacrifice would not be forgotten. But there was no time to mourn. Not yet. The final battle awaited, and the fate of all creation hung in the balance. With a deep breath, Wukong rose to his feet, his eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. "We've come this far," he said, his voice filled with grim determination. "Now, let's finish this." The surviving guardians, Mei Ling and General Jian, gathered around him, their resolve unwavering. Together, they would face the ultimate darkness, and together, they would bring an end to Xiang Yao's reign of terror. As they descended into the abyss, the air grew colder, the darkness thicker, until it felt as though they were walking through a void. But Wukong's spirit burned bright, a beacon of hope in the encroaching night. The final confrontation was at hand, and soon Wukong would not falter. Part 5. The Abyss of Shadows. Descending into the abyss, Sun Wukong and his companions were swallowed by the darkness, the last remnants of light flickering out as they ventured deeper into Xiang Yao's domain. The air was thick with an oppressive weight, as if the very essence of despair and malice had seeped into the atmosphere, making each breath a struggle. The path through the abyss was treacherous, a winding labyrinth of jagged rocks and swirling shadows. The ground beneath their feet felt unstable, as though it might crumble away at any moment, plunging them into the endless void below. But Wukong led the way with unwavering determination, his golden eyes cutting through the darkness like twin beacons. As they ventured further, the environment around them began to change. The walls of the chasm pulsed with a dark, organic energy, veins of shadow spreading across the stone like a living entity. The air grew colder, the silence so complete that even their footsteps were muffled, as though the abyss itself sought to consume them. At the heart of the abyss lay the Citadel of Shadows, a towering structure of black stone and twisted spires that seemed to reach out toward the heavens in a mockery of defiance. This was the seat of Xiang Yao's power, the very source of the darkness that had spread across the world. The group halted at the base of the citadel, its looming presence casting a long shadow over them. Mei Ling stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is it, Xiang Yao's lair. Beyond these walls lies the source of his power. But be warned, the closer we get, the stronger his influence will become. Stay vigilant." Wukong nodded, gripping his staff tightly. "We've come this far. There's no turning back now." As they crossed the threshold into the citadel, the atmosphere shifted once more. The air was thick with the scent of decay and rot, and the walls seemed to close in around them, twisting and warping as though alive. Shadows slithered across the floor, taking on grotesque shapes that flickered in and out of existence. But Wukong was undeterred. He had faced the wrath of the heavens and survived. He had been imprisoned for millennia and had emerged stronger. Xiang Yao was powerful, but he was not invincible. The citadel's corridors were a maze of darkness, each turn leading them deeper into the heart of the abyss. As they pressed on, they encountered the twisted remnants of Xiang Yao's servants, beings who had once been mortal, now transformed into abominations of shadow and flesh. Their eyes burned with a malevolent light, and their voices were a chorus of despair. The battles that followed were brutal and unrelenting, each victory costing them dearly. But Wukong and his allies fought with the ferocity of those who knew that failure meant the end of all things. Mei Ling's shadow magic proved invaluable, allowing them to outmaneuver and outwit their enemies, while General Jian's warriors held the line with unwavering courage. Yet, as they drew closer to the citadel's core, the toll of the journey began to show. The darkness gnawed at their minds, whispering of hopelessness and defeat. The shadows played tricks on their senses, distorting reality and making them question their own perceptions. But Wukong's resolve never wavered. He had come too far, and too much was at stake. Finally, they reached the innermost chamber of the citadel, a vast, cavernous space dominated by a massive throne of black stone, upon which sat Xiang Yao himself. The King of Shadows was a being of pure malevolence, his form shifting and writhing like a storm of darkness. His eyes glowed with an unnatural fire, and his presence filled the chamber with an overwhelming sense of dread. "So, the Monkey King comes to face his doom." Xiang Yao's voice was a deep, rumbling growl, resonating with the very essence of the abyss. "You are brave, son Wukong, but bravery will not save you. The darkness is eternal, and it will consume all." Wukong stepped forward, his staff gleaming with a faint golden light. "Your reign of terror ends here, Xiang Yao. The world will not fall to your darkness." Xiang Yao chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down the spines of all who heard it. "You cannot defeat me, Monkey King. I am the darkness. I am the end of all things." With a wave of his hand, Xiang Yao unleashed a torrent of shadow, a wave of pure darkness that surged toward Wukong and his allies with the force of a tidal wave. But Wukong was ready. He raised his staff, channeling the power of the eternal flame that still burned within him. The golden light flared, clashing with the darkness in a blinding explosion of energy. The battle that ensued was nothing short of apocalyptic. Xiang Yao's power was immense, his control over the shadows near absolute. Every strike Wukong made was met with a counterattack of unimaginable ferocity. The very ground beneath them cracked and splintered, and the walls of the citadel trembled as the forces of light and darkness clashed in a titanic struggle. Mei Ling and the Guardians fought valiantly, their combined magic and strength pushing back against Xiang Yao's overwhelming power. But the King of Shadows was relentless, his attacks growing more savage with each passing moment. It was clear that this was not a battle they could win through strength alone. As the battle raged on, Wukong began to realize the truth. Xiang Yao could not be defeated by conventional means. He was not just a being of darkness. He was the embodiment of the void itself, a force that could not simply be destroyed. But there was another way. Wukong turned to Mei Ling, his voice strained but resolute. "Mei Ling, the Guardians, the ritual. We need to use the ritual to seal him away." Mei Ling's eyes widened in understanding. The ritual they had used to open the Abyss Gate could be reversed, its power used to bind Xiang Yao to the Abyss, trapping him within his own domain for eternity. But it would require immense power, and there was no guarantee they would survive. "Are you sure, Wukong?" Mei Ling asked, her voice tinged with concern. "This could destroy us all." Wukong nodded, his gaze fixed on Xiang Yao, who was already preparing another devastating attack. "There's no other way. We have to do this, or everything will be lost." With a grim determination, Mei Ling and the remaining Guardians began the ritual, their voices rising in a chant that reverberated through the chamber. The air crackled with energy as the ritual's power began to take hold, the shadows around them recoiling as the magic began to bind them. Xiang Yao sensed what was happening, his eyes blazing with fury. "You dare to bind me, Monkey King? You will fail. The darkness cannot be contained." Wukong ignored the taunts, focusing all his energy on holding Xiang Yao at bay, while the ritual took effect. The light from his staff grew brighter, pushing back the shadows as the chamber began to tremble. The walls of the citadel cracked, the ground beneath them splitting open as the power of the ritual reached its peak. And then, with a final earth-shattering roar, Xiang Yao unleashed his full power, a wave of darkness that threatened to engulf them all. But at that moment, the ritual completed, and a vortex of light and shadow erupted from the center of the chamber, swallowing Xiang Yao whole. The force of the explosion was immense, throwing Wukong and his allies back as the entire citadel began to collapse. The walls crumbled, the ground shattered, and the abyss itself seemed to convulse as the darkness was pulled into the vortex, taking Xiang Yao with it. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, the echoes of the battle fading into the void. And then, slowly, the darkness began to recede, the shadows dissipating as the light of the eternal flame pierced through the abyss. Wukong struggled to his feet, his body battered and bruised, but still alive. Mei Ling and the Guardians were also recovering, their forms flickering with the last remnants of the ritual's power. The citadel was gone, reduced to rubble, and the abyss was closing, the chasm sealing itself as the darkness was finally contained. But as the dust settled, Wukong realized the true cost of their victory. Several of the Guardians had not survived the ritual, their forms fading into the ether as their spirits were consumed by the magic. Mei Ling, too, was weakened, her strength nearly spent. And then he saw it, a figure emerging from the shadows, a being of light and darkness intertwined. It was Xiang Yao, but not as he had been before. The ritual had not destroyed him. It had transformed him, binding him to the abyss, but also giving him a new form, one that was neither fully light nor fully dark. Xiang Yao's voice was softer now, almost sad. "You have won, Sun Wukong. But at what cost? The darkness is gone, but so too is the light. The world will never be the same." Wukong stared at him, the weight of their battle heavy on his shoulders. "We did what we had to do. The world will heal in time." Xiang Yao nodded slowly, his form beginning to fade. "Perhaps. But remember this, Monkey King. There can be no victory without sacrifice. The darkness will always be a part of this world, just as the light will. You cannot have one without the other." And with that, Xiang Yao was gone, his form dissipating into the ether, leaving behind only silence. Wukong turned to Mei Ling, who was watching him with tired eyes. "It's over," he said quietly. She nodded, her expression somber. "Yes, it is. But the world will never forget what happened here. We have changed it, for better or worse." Wukong sighed, the weight of the battle finally catching up to him. The world will move on, as it always does. But we have given it a chance to find its own balance. And with that, Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, turned and began the long journey back to the surface, leaving the abyss and its shadows behind. The world had been saved, but at a great cost. And as Wukong emerged from the darkness, he knew that the story was far from over. The shadows had been contained, but they would never be truly gone. The balance would always be fragile, and the struggle between light and dark would continue, as it always had. But for now, there was peace. And that, Wukong thought, was enough.